appoints me to do. I don't do anything otherwise. As a side note, this may frustrate some of you. If one of you calls me and asks me to do something, I can't do anything for one of you. I can only do something for all of you. So there is very robust discussions in the minutes regarding why this JPA was brought up. I have told county council as well as the councils for the other GSAs that I don't know what this board wants because there hadn't been an opportunity to discuss it at that time. This was back in May. We had discussions at the GSA meetings in July and August. And again, there was still no determination of how the GSA wanted to move forward with implementing the GSP, whether it was still to continue a cooperative effort with the other GSAs or to potentially break off and implement the GSP as it affects this region only in particular. I encourage both times for the GSA board to review key portions of the GSP, including chapters 8 and 9, which talk about what is required, what triggers requirements under the GSP, and come up with questions, additional documentation, whatever this board needs to decide how you want to move forward, because the MOA is insufficient. The MOA is a very temporary situation that was meant to create a GSP and then move towards implementation, but it is not enough for implementation. There is a lack of governance as far as if you want to continue to cooperate, there needs to be some formal document that says what that cooperation means, or you decide to just implement on your own and figure out how that's going to work. And so the culmination of that was a legal document that shows you what the legal structure, the more formal governance would look like. It's not up for adoption right now. It's up for you to review, ask questions, discuss what terms you don't like. Maybe you don't like the whole thing, that's okay. But we need to know how this GSA wants to implement the GSP going forward, and whether you want that to be a cooperative effort, and if so, is a JPA on the table?
Thank you. More comment?
I'm waiting on public comment.
This is about how it went last time.
Okay, so the cost to us if this goes forward is what?
So
It depends.
Is what?
It depends.
It depends, right,
on
it's
the
not-
level. So a JPA, a joint powers authority, can only exercise the common authorities amongst the entities that are involved, and those entities decide which common authorities they want the JPA to exercise. And so we're at the very base level of deciding what that is.
Okay.
I mean, these GSAs, you all have a breadth of authorities, and right now what the JPA anticipates is the potential fallowing, the Miller program, the fallowing program, which I know is controversial, and collection of groundwater extraction fees. There are some serious issues. So, for example, one major concern that Kelly and I have brought up is this idea of charging all extractors and even de minimis. And for a small district like this, there isn't a general fund to pull from something like that. You have to have a Prop 218 or 26 process, and you have to charge really everyone. And we don't know how we could justify that. And so far, there's not a fix for that. There's been some brainstorming on how to deal with it, but it is a very basic issue of how someone that's not a county or a city without a general fund is going to pay their portion without hurting their non-extractable water users. So there's a crossroads that we're at, for example. So this is really, it's a base, and it's really to gauge what involvement this GSA wants, and if you want that cooperative effort, what you want that to look like, and what portions of the GSP you want to cooperate on and which ones you don't.
So we could choose to not cooperate with the whole thing?
Absolutely.
Or, and if we did that, what would be the repercussion with the state? Eventually would they force us into that?
No. But you may, and Kelly, correct me if I'm wrong, but you have a regional GSP right now that contemplates, I mean, it's region to region, but you may have to like do your own GSP update. You know, right now you all cooperate to do that. Kelly can probably speak better.
What would that cost me?
So on the very basic level, if we weren't part of the PDCC and we were doing this all on our own, we would have to do our own annual updates showing how we're complying with the GSP and how we're either affecting, not affecting the area around us. We would also have to do our own 5-year evaluation of the GSP most likely, or partner with, you know, assuming that everybody else joined the JPA, we have to partner with the JPA to do that evaluation of the GSP or whatever, however that looks in the future. You know, assuming that DWR allows us to separate from the PDCC and allows us to be on our own, it looks like we would be into it for somewhere in the neighborhood of $30,000 to $40,000 a year to do everything on our own. Most likely it would be through our staff and our district engineer. We would have to hire or at least participate in some studies or, you know, more or less buy into the studies that are being done on behalf of the basin. But at this time, that's what it looks like is $30,000 to $40,000. Theoretically, assuming that a adequate JPA is formed and this moves forward like I understand it is supposed to move forward, the JPA should be charging the fee to the property owners. They shouldn't be charging us. They should be charging the property owners directly. If they don't do that and they just send Santa Gala bill, then it's probably in the neighborhood of $30,000 to $40,000, depending on what projects they force us into.
Well, if the fees don't cover administrative costs,
That's all they cover.
then each agency is on the hook for a portion of that, and that's where we come into the issue of
Yeah. The first
how do we
few,
not affect our regular water users.
the first few years are what's going to be really problematic because they're not going to have recovered enough through property tax to cover their full costs. They won't even know what their full costs are because they have nothing to base it on. So they're just guessing. I can't sit here and tell you guys need to join this JPA or get out of the JPA. I think at this point it's probably a 50-50. But we do need to go through the JPA and make sure that you guys are comfortable with what it says and what we would be bound to if we join it, to make sure that we don't get all the way to the end of this thing and they're like, oh, well, we really don't like that. Well, that ship's kind of sailed.
When does that decision need to be made?
Theoretically, if the timeline is to be believed, we would need to have adopted this, or all 5 GSAs. This is a pretty tall order, by the way, having all 5 GSAs adopt this by March, which I don't think is realistic. If you did that, then you would have just enough time to adopt the rates before we ran out of time with our grant. Honestly, I don't think that adopting this by March is going to happen. There's already discussion, or already statements by EPC and Chan San Juan that they are not happy with representation and not happy with what they would have to theoretically be paying for. So I think that it's probably going to drag out till February or March before we have something that everybody can agree on.
Okay.
I think that overall how this is probably like 90-95% there as far as I'm concerned for our district, if we were to join it. But there's still some things that need to be worked out, you know, namely what happens if there's a shortfall in the JPA, who pays for that? In the first couple of years when they're getting started, who pays for that? And I think our representation, as it's stated here, is a 1-to-1, so 1 director, 1 vote type of scenario. It doesn't sound like the other agencies are necessarily in favor of that. If that changes, then I would highly caution against that, because that really puts us back to where we are today, which is not where this is supposed to go. So, but again, at this point, like Christina said, this is for you guys to take a look at it, see if this is something that you guys can agree to, or what you guys really don't like or don't understand, so we can work through the different aspects of it and provide a comment back to reform it if it's necessary.
Or let us know if you want an alternative plan. Like again, I encourage this board, just like I did the other, to review specifically chapters 8 and 9 of the GSP, which talks about what this region has committed to and under what triggers. So right now, there isn't anything triggering action, right? So the way the GSP works is if you have, there's certain events that occur. So if you've got a certain level of subsidence, right? That will trigger specific action that's laid out in the GSP. And it's by 2050, these implementations are supposed to occur, assuming these triggers are going to happen, which were predicted, right? And so right now, there is nothing triggering action in this moment. And so you want to look at those. I am not a water expert. Certainly, probably most of you and Mr. Lewald know more about water than I do, and especially this system and the expectations. And so I encourage you to talk to Kelly and the district engineer and others who are familiar with what the likelihood of these triggers and when they're going to occur to help inform your decision on how you want to move forward and what you want to do. There's nothing locking you into this. There's no one has agreed to enter into a JPA. This is the first time this board's seeing this, and as far as I know, after this PDCC meeting, it'll be the first time anyone else is seeing this agreement on those other boards as well. And so it's just a starting point, which is exactly why no way that March you're going to have a JPA in place. That's no way. And I specifically wanted to wait between August and now to have this discussion because we had such a turnover on board. It didn't make sense to start making decisions or having more robust conversations in September, October, November when we were going to have a majority board change.
Thank
Here
you.
we are.
All right, thank you. Any other board comments or questions?
That document is on our website if you guys are looking for it. For retractors.
The GSP?
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair Gerwald. Yeah. Everybody that showed up to this meeting was blindsided by this discussion on a joint powers agreement. The MOA was done in secret. There was no public comment on the MOA. And those percentage points on how the votes were done in secret on who was going to pay what, and nobody's paid crap. It's all been grant money. And now that they're going to have to pay something out of the pockets, they're looking for other people to pay stuff. If the landowners over the basin are going to pay, your 900 people are going to pay, and the 33,000 people in Paso Robles are going to pay, because they're not going to be separate de minimis over the other de minimis. 90% of the water is used by large ag. What I found amazing was, when I was in the meeting before the town hall started, I looked at this woman, I said, I know that woman from somewhere. Where did I know that woman from? And then I go, that's Elizabeth Evans. And I told her, when I stood up and spoke, you've been suing me for 11 years in the quiet title action. You're the lawyer for the county. And she said she's been meeting with the other attorneys. Your attorney, Paso Robles attorneys, her, and the other guy shared an attorney. This is a conflict of interest. You have 3 attorneys that are suing their constituents over the basin, and a quiet title action that's almost done. One hearing left in January, for 11 years. And you're gonna make decision on how to charge us money? I don't think so. You're getting ready for a new lawsuit. I can tell you that right now. Because the people over the basin already voted on this in March of 2016. We didn't want these people involved in a special district. We didn't want them in charge, and we didn't want to pay extra fees. We don't have a problem in the basin other than the people that think they should be in charge of management. Because they haven't managed anything in 20 years. They're the same exact groups, from the prior agreement to Prague to these two fake water districts. They're all paid by big money. Jay Lohr got up and was embarrassed to say that his plan for the blended water was nothing what he thought it was going to be or design, and he wasn't going to saddle his 3 kids with $85 million on infrastructure without any even water to grow grapes. There's 17 vineyards for sale in our basin right now. The problem isn't all of us small people or all this. The problem is paying too many lawyers to settle stuff that doesn't need to be settled, and having the wrong people in charge of thinking they should be the management when they can't even mow your lawn. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so this is just discussion. Did we provide direction, Mr. Dobbs?
I think in light of Mr. Braywell's comments, I would like direction from this new board on whether you would like me to continue to have discussions with the other legal counsel on this JPA or other options.
I personally say no. I mean, the way I understand this, nothing against your firm, but I mean, basically you got their lawyers, our lawyers, mingling together. That's a conflict of interest.
You think that lawyers who represent different agencies who have to cooperate, talking to each other is a conflict of interest? Because it's necessary. I have to talk to lawyers from the other agencies. Especially when you have a joint GSP that you guys are all.
Yeah.
I represent the GSA as well, and so if I'm not having any discussions with any attorneys from these other agencies, then you are going to be in the dark on things that are going on, and they are going to be doing things without you. And we have to work out the legal aspects of things, and so just to be clear, we're not making there's no decision-making going on. I make very clear that I don't have information until I bring it to you and you give me direction on the information that then I can disseminate to others. But if you don't have your attorneys talking to the attorneys for the people that you're supposed to be cooperating with, then you are going to be left out of decisions and left in the dark on things, and you're not going to get legal advice on things on how things most benefit you. So if you have one of the attorneys from the other entities bringing this to you, they wouldn't be bringing it in the same tone that I am of, you don't have implementation responsibilities right now, you don't need to enter into this cooperative agreement if you don't want to. I'm trying to give you all the information that you get to make an informed decision, but I wouldn't be able to do that if I wasn't having discussions with the other attorneys. And they're very few discussions, by the way, because I don't know what you want. And I didn't know what the previous board wanted either. They hadn't looked at everything enough, and when we brought it up, it was overwhelming. And so we came up with some legal aspects to try to help the conversation along, and here we are. But if you direct me not to talk to them, I won't.
Now, that'd be a decision of the whole board, not just me, but
Yeah.
it's something we need to talk about.
So,
Now it's time.
so what I would recommend is that, I don't know how many of you have had enough time to read through the whole thing and think about what it really means. Obviously, we don't have to make any decision right now, and I would urge you not to make any decision right now. But it's important to stay part of the conversation until you guys determine that you don't want to be part of it. once you, as a board, decide you don't want to be part of the JPA anymore, then we can cease discussing the JPA with the other attorneys. By having our attorney represent us in those meetings with the other attorneys reinforces our position and makes sure that we're not getting run over.
Run over how?
So they're not working something in there, like we don't, like previously this board, not you guys, but the previous board, has wanted a one-to-one, one director, one vote. Other GSAs want it weighted. They want it similar to what it is now. So like the county would have 30%, or EPC would have 29%, or whatever it is. And we'd have our 3%. So our voice wouldn't matter as much as the county or the other agencies. But the purpose of this JPA is really for the betterment of the basin. So each GSA really should have an equal vote because we're part of the basin too. So having our attorney there to make sure that the language is being written and being followed based on what we want is important. The cost to have her there is really minimal. But once this board decides that you don't want to be part of the JPA, then obviously we need to make sure that we move forward in a direction that's going to protect the district, after that.
There will still be legal implications related to implementation of a basin-wide GSP. It's going to be very difficult to move forward without being able to have conversations with the attorneys for those other agencies on how we move forward in general, even if it is separating.
And what are we moving forward to accomplish? I'm so lost in this conversation.
Right, yeah, I know.
Acronym after acronym after acronym.
It's a lot. So the legislature put forth the Groundwater Sustainability Act.
I understand
which
that.
required these GSAs to be formed and required these groundwater sustainability plans to be put in place, and then they had to be approved by DWR. We have a GSP approved by DWR, but it is a joint GSP for the whole basin with all these other agencies. We don't have, this GSA doesn't have.
Which causes infighting?
It causes discussions to be had on when implementation is appropriate and what type of implementation is appropriate.
So if that's a decision that's going to be made, why doesn't this district just ride along with whatever's going to happen? I mean, it doesn't sound like we can spend all this money and at the end of the day, it's really not going to matter.
It will, because if you ride along with whatever everybody else wants, and you keep spending the money that they tell you you need to spend to contribute, you have no voice in the conversation of what funding looks like.
But if they want to spend money and we don't, and they outvote us, you still spend money, correct? We still have to participate by spending the money.
That's the question. That depends on your level of involvement. Yes, if you're part of the JPA, you're right, but if you split off and do things on your own, then no. And that's what we need to know is, we're at a point where, for better or worse, this GSA entered into an agreement to cooperate, and that agreement is outdated and insufficient. And so now we have to figure out how we're going to move forward. I would say the agreement was insufficient in the first place. I had nothing to do with it. But looking at it, it is not accomplishing. It's not accomplishing anything anymore, and it's actually causing problems. And so this board just needs to figure out what you want to do. And then I can advocate for that in whatever capacity you need or want me to.
I want to reduce legal costs to this district. That's my goal.
Okay.
Yes, okay, Dr. Smiley.
So I did read through the whole thing, and there's a lot of things that bothered me, and I walked away thinking, after I read it, thinking, why are we involved? But it would be foolish not to have counsel there. Anytime you're dealing with these types of things, you don't have one lawyer talking to the other side and deciding things together and finding where the other side's coming from, and our lawyer protecting our position. It would be foolish not to have that done. But my opinion is I'm not happy with this. I don't like the way it's structured. The budget, what did they say, 1.75 million to 12 million within how long a time?
5 years.
Yeah, 5 years, it's gonna go from 1.75 million to 12.5 or whatever it is million. For oversight. That's crazy.
Well, those numbers were including a lot of projects.
Well, still,
So the low end was basically $1 million.
there's no justification
The
for it.
low end was
They don't have
administration.
justification. It's just throwing numbers out there, as far as I'm concerned.
For projects that do what?
Nothing.
Honestly, nothing.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. It's gonna happen.
And that's what we need, the projects in particular that have been proposed are not for the betterment of the basin. They're not going to really help. The things that they could have done, they sort of skated by and didn't do. And, you know, the projects alone might be a good enough reason not to be part of a future JPA. But until this board decides that they don't want to be part of a JPA, which is eventually going to succeed the PDCC, we do need to the district does need to have some sort of representation in these staff level meetings and at these board meetings to make sure that we're not getting screwed somehow. You know, I understand you want to reduce legal costs. Our legal costs are the lowest they've been probably in the amount of time, the whole time I've been here.
That's because this whole thing has wound down. We've spent, what, $1.5 million protecting ourselves from nothing?
So
We should never have gotten involved in this lawsuit in the
we
first
pay
place.
a legal
You don't
fee for a
have a
lot of
choice but to be involved in the lawsuit, you're a defendant. Mr. Graywall paints this as the district suing him, but Mr. Graywall sued the district.
I understand
That's
that.
all
So did one of our board members.
That is not,
You're right.
that is not a true
You're
statement.
100% correct. They are all.
Why wasn't that a conflict of interest the entire time for the last 4 years? She sat in on these meetings.
No, she
Why?
didn't sit on any
Yeah,
meetings
whatever.
regarding
She
litigation.
shouldn't have been on this board.
That's, you know, you can have that opinion, but there was no.
This is all about
conflict of
grace.
interest sitting on the
That's what it
board.
comes down to.
But you don't have a choice but to be involved.
We
in
didn't have this
litigation.
problem when we grew alfalfa.
Yeah.
It was a different time then too.
Okay, well,
Anyway, so we just need direction on how, if you guys want to table this to a future meeting, so you have more time to look at it. If you want to do nothing with it, you know, whatever is your choice there.
May I say one more thing and then I'll
Certainly.
shut my mouth and do. That's up to the board.
Sure, yes. Say it.
All right, I'm a plaintiff, you're the defendant. I don't know why I'm the plaintiff, I was protecting my property rights. I wasn't asking for any amount of water, I wasn't asking to sue anybody, I wasn't asking to do anything. I was calming the title on my land for people that wanted to file prescription against my property rights. The defendants decided they had affirmative defenses to say that they should have rights on my property. So when somebody says I'm suing them, I didn't sue them. They claim that they have a right to trespass on my rights. And I was defending my rights. And all I had to prove with the court was I own my property, I had percolating water. All the other trials were the defendants that had the burden of proof to prove their affirmative right that they had a right to trespass on me. I don't even live in the basin. 42 properties aren't even in the basin, but they wouldn't let us out. Which I think those 42 properties have an action against everybody for keeping us in it for this last 11 years. For our cost, because we're not part of this problem. So, when you don't understand what quiet title means, and you don't understand who has the burden of proof, and you don't understand that you have a right to protect your property, then you can claim anything you want to claim. The bottom line is, $15 million on your side of all those people, and $3 million on our side have been wasted for arrogance and stupidity because people wanted to prove a point that we would stop because we would give up. And we didn't give up. And by the end of January, this crap will be over and you will have got your 187 acre feet of water for your $1.5 million or $2 million when you get done, and Paso has their little bit of water they got, and the county has their little bit of water they got, and what did it solve? Not a damn thing, other than they were gonna tell us that the state of California Constitution didn't matter, that property owners have the beneficial right to the water beneath their property. I don't sell my water, I don't transfer my water, I don't exchange my water, I don't export my water. But other people do that stuff. And that is the bottom line there. I don't want you guys to not do anything that you're doing. I just want to be left alone. Is that simple? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, what would you gentlemen like to do?
Is there any reason we couldn't just say, we don't want to be in the JPA?
You could absolutely say that, but then you need to come up with a plan of implementing your portion of the GSP.
Yeah, well,
What does that entail?
It's a good question. I mean, that's why we need to look at the triggers and the likelihood of them to happen and when and what the responsibilities are from here to 2050 and what the cost is going to be and the updates and all of that. And so you need more information.
I would say it's not a decision that we are prepared to make, at least not in my case. I would think that we should digest this JPA in detail. Maybe that might be something that would be beneficial for a special meeting where we can get together and discuss it as a board.
For sure, need to have more conversation about it. I don't know, like have somebody come in and talk to us about it, besides Greg, in detail, as well as read it, have it available. Just go forward with this, and keep council.
Things the way they are already.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, okay, well, that's where I'm at.
I would like to,
Where we get more information.
yeah, because there's a lot of information out there if you know who to talk to.
That's the key though.
That's right.
Is knowing who to talk to.
Yeah, well,
Because I don't want to get one side, I want to understand the whole thing.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Not just Mr. Graywall, but there's a few other people that are really,
Yeah.
So we can continue this to January. We can work, or I can work on our side to try to bring more information about what it would really mean to not be part of it anymore. I can't guarantee that that would be ready for the January meeting, but again, their hope of having this approved by March is pretty slim. So I wouldn't be in any rush to, adopt this.